And there is plenty of money to be made in banking, particularly with new technology. And therefore, there's no need. You can run a very profitable business without actually in any way exploiting your customers. You can treat your customers very well and do very well yourself. And that's the sort of model that we're beginning to see in banking and will persist, I think.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Andy North. I'm joined today by Camilla Cook, Chief Marketing Officer at Zinja. Camilla, thank you for being here.
It's lovely to be here.
Let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about Zinja and what is a neobank?
So a neobank, as it sounds, is brand new. That means, of course, it's 100% digital, it's made for mobile. But in a way, digital and mobile is a bit of a given these days. What really distinguishes a neobank is it brings none of the legacy systems or legacy business of a traditional bank and none of the legacy attitude. So a real neobank is banking disrupted, is a bank built from first principles and designed for now, not for 700 years ago, which most of the banks are.
What are some of the demographics of your customers? Is it a wide span or is it primarily more the younger ages?
It depends what you mean by young. I would say millennials, but millennials are getting on now, okay? They're getting fairly long in the tooth. So our main audience is, yes, around 25 to 45. Essentially, it requires you to be digitally savvy and to want to do things digitally. Anyone who wants to go to a branch and talk to a physical human being in the flesh is not going to bank with us. So there's zero paper, there's zero branches, and what that means is, with no physical location, that radically reduces the number of staff and the amount and the costs. Now, those costs that we save can then be passed on in the form of more competitive rates for our customers.
Tell me about some of the crowdfunding. I know that Zinja did a first series sort of in a normal conventional financial funding, but you also have done 2 crowdfunding series. Tell us a little bit about that and your thoughts on crowdfunding for businesses.
That's right. So we have a philosophy at Zinja that we are a bank built with our customers and in their interests. And we took with our customers to a very literal extent. We said from the very beginning that we felt if we were going to collaborate with them to actually design Zinja and design the product that they wanted, they should be allowed to share in some of Zinja's potential success. And so we said from day one, the moment equity crowdfunding, becomes legal in Australia, we will launch a crowdfunding campaign. And we were the first out of the gate on the first day that it became possible to do it. And it was very exciting. We had 1,200 investors the first time round, and we raised over about $2.5 million. And it was incredible. They are a very passionate group of advocates. They're our strongest supporters. They're probably also our harshest critics. And we know them well. And it's very exciting to have people that close to what we're doing. We then actually did another crowdfund about a year later, which was the exact moment we could go again and still give people the same investment opportunity. A whole load of new investors came in, and we also had a lot of repeat investors. So that's been a very exciting part of our journey.
And has that built, I'm assuming, some buzz about Zinja just both in the financial marketplace as well as just in general?
Absolutely. I think that it was, from my perspective as a CMO, it was a great marketing asset because what we've mobilized is about 2,500 people out there with skin in the game. And they have an interest in Zinja doing well. And so they support us at every step. And certainly they are very supportive in terms of not just talking about us, but coming into the offices, taking part in all our research to help us build the best possible product.
You yourself have a fascinating career. You have worked with everything from startups to nonprofits to global brands. Talk a little bit about what drives you and what drove you to Zinja. What interested you in that?
I guess what happened was that I have been working in advertising for a long time. Some people call it the greatest waste of intelligence after chess. I think the thing is that to some extent you can get a bit jaded in a commercial career. You're not always, and certainly in the old days, you weren't convinced of the value of what you were doing for society. You were essentially trying to persuade people to buy stuff, which wasn't always 100% the right thing to do. So I took a walk on the wild side and went into the non-profit area. And what was really fascinating there was, it was wonderful finally to be bringing my skills to bear in something that I felt really mattered. But I was incredibly frustrated by how non-commercial and inefficient it was and how it could do so much better. And what we did in that context, and a lot of the work I did in that area, was about actually bringing commercial best practice to the not-for-profit arena to make it more impactful. And ironically, going back to Zinger, what I was trying to do was the opposite. I was actually going back into the commercial world where I felt we could bring purpose to bear. And so what really attracted me to Zinger was there is an opportunity to really help people make more out of their money and do better and increase financial literacy. And I see no conflict between that and making money. And I think these kind of win-win business models are very much of this generation, and the most successful companies in the world are as driven by purpose as they are by profit.
You mentioned purpose. You've done some great pro bono work in your career. You've worked for finding a cure for brain cancer and so forth. Are brands able to stand on the sidelines anymore, or do they need to engage in more purpose-driven marketing?
I think they do need to engage in things that have positive social impact. A lot of the research around millennials say that they are getting choosier and choosier about the brands which they choose to buy or the brands they choose to engage with. And a lot of that is around ethics. And a lot of that, for example, they have higher and higher demands in terms of environmental standards, but also general social impact. And a lot of the support we get is because we are ethical. Banking used to be a far more kindly profession that actually really tried to help guide people. And somewhere along the line, somewhere along the way, it's become adversarial. And the interests of the customers were no longer aligned to the interests of the banks. And I think there is a global feeling that that needs to be addressed. And there is plenty of money to be made in banking, particularly with new technology. And therefore, there's no need. You can run a very profitable business without actually in any way exploiting your customers. You can treat your customers very well and do very well yourself. And that's the sort of model that we're beginning to see in banking and will persist, I think.
And Zinger is Australia-based. Do you foresee growth internationally?
Absolutely. Not immediately. We've got to get across the line with all the products we need to get across the line with here. But certainly there's potential to move into other markets in different ways. It might well be that we're taking our IP there, or we're taking our brand there, or both. We're open to different possibilities in different markets.
You talked about some new technologies. Are there any, as a marketer, are there any that excite you? And perhaps on the fintech side, are there any, and are they separate, or do they both work together with some of those technologies?
I think they're completely combined. If you think about what our purpose is to help people make more out of their money. And the way we're going to do that is by increasing money mindfulness. So bringing money to mind to people in a very engaging way and nudging them gently towards better everyday behaviors until those behaviors become habits. And in fact, it is those minor adjustments that make the big difference in the financial long term. Now, to do that, the technology we're talking about is, of course, data-driven communications, which actually in the old days was called personalization or marketing automation. And so it's very much my background. And I think, and I'm sorry to jump on the bandwagon here, but obviously that's going to be driven more and more by machine learning. I think that what we're going to see is actually artificial intelligence or machine learning technology, if you like, that actually is what's going to bring humanity back to banking.
Do you see that, and that's a great line, by the way, do you see AI and or blockchain or machine learning taking personalization to the next step? For instance, you've got the Netflix of the world, the Spotifys and so forth that somewhat recognize you and your taste, but only within their world. Do you see something becoming more broader? For instance, if they're on Zinger and they've shown an interest in certain types of products on Zinger and they go elsewhere and it recognizes that?
The secret there is probably not elsewhere. The secret is that certainly we see ourselves as the Netflix of banking, and that's exactly what we're all about. And what you can do with the kind of incredibly rich data that you get as a bank is to open up a marketplace. And this is a new business model that we're seeing in neobanks around the world, when rather than relying just on traditional banking revenue streams, they're actually, with the help of open banking and open data, able to say to their customers, look, and part of helping them make more out of the money is to say, you're paying well over the odds for your utility bill or for this financial service or even a travel product. Look at this, why don't you buy this and save yourself some money? So those sort of API integrated partnerships we're going to see, extending across a lot of neobanks. They're already alive and happening in the UK, and that's certainly a path we'll look to follow.
Given the GDPR in the European Union and it's started to wash onto the American shores as well, and particularly in California, have you seen that concern here that, oh, okay, my data is being used in ways that I'm not certain I want it to be used?
Yes, and in fact what we're seeing globally, I think, and in a way Australia is closer to Europe and the UK in its legislation on this, but what we're seeing is a shift away from the corporate controlling data to the consumer controlling their data, and the consumer expecting the corporate only to use that data if it benefits the consumer. So that is a global movement in and of its own right, and we are certainly very mindful that there's a whole plethora of things we need to think about. Number one, we can only use data to deliver value back to customers, and part of that is actually keeping it safe. So what we go to bed at night thinking about and get up in the morning thinking about is data security. And then a key part of financial trust now, trust is critical to any bank. And we believe that the key trust is going to be, what are you doing with my data? Not just to keep it safe, but to deliver value back to me. So we don't see the model being so much that we would never sell our customers' data to anyone. What we need to do is derive value from it to give back to the consumer.
And have you seen that, have success with that model?
Yeah, well, we've certainly, what we're finding is that where we guide people to make certain decisions in using their own data that help them financially, that is a classic example of a win-win, where they trust us more, they're more likely to stay with us, they're more likely to take out another product, and they're more likely to recommend us to their friends. So data is going to be a key value exchange where we benefit them and where they in turn reward us.
I like your customer focus, and I want to go down that a little bit with your blog, which I'm fascinated by. It's not a standard blog, and particularly for a bank. A lot of banks don't even have blogs, but your blog is fascinating. It's got a customer focus, it has an employee focus, it has a topical focus, and obviously that's one of your areas of responsibility. So talk a little bit about that and how that's been received by your customers.
Our customers are quite eclectic. So in the blog, we need to write quite broadly. So on the one hand, we've got a lot of quite, I love them, but very geeky people who want to talk endlessly about blockchain or AI or core banking even, or agile methodology. So we need to give them interesting areas that they can actually engage with. On the other hand, our philosophy at Zinger about money is that it cuts deep. What's been so wrong with banking for so long is they've given us a really cold, grey, indecipherable ledger to manage the most culturally nuanced and emotionally charged area of our lives. And the fact is that money can rip relationships apart. It can rip countries apart. It's incredibly powerful, and there's a lot of taboo about it. So we feel it's very important to open up the conversation and actually address some of those taboos, because we think that attitude and mindset have a massive impact on people's financial well-being. So we're opening that can of worms in our blog on occasion, and sometimes we owe it to people to face the big pictures. You know, there are some big financial elephants in the room that we don't ignore. In Australia, for example, it's the housing affordability crisis. It might be that there are issues of gambling, and for example, our cousin Monzo in the UK has actually taken that whole area head on. There's also the gender financial gap. If you want someone to get ahead and they're female, you really have to take a look at that. And then globally, there's the issue of the unbanked, which we've seen addressed in Europe and also North America. So the idea with the blog is to bring some of those topics to the fore, to show our credentials in terms of grappling and enjoying technology, grappling with and enjoying technology, and also to bring Zinger to life. And that's we do by talking about our partners, who we call Zinger Mates, our employees, who are quite a wonderful bunch of people, and also our customers. They love to tell us their stories, and we love to hear them.
It seems to be a great vehicle for brand growth, not just through your customers and these are our new products, but literally through letting people know where you stand and what topics are important to them and that they're important to you.
Absolutely, and I think people find it refreshing that we're a bank that's prepared to make a stand on some of these issues. And I think overall, Zinger's saying it's time that Australians and people globally had a bank that was looking out for their interests.
This has been Velocitize Talks. My guest today has been Camilla Cook, Chief Marketing Officer at Zinger. Camilla, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.